Hey, y'all, what's going on? It is Rosendo. I am live and in person now, not just creeping in the background, messing with y'all in the chat. You already know. I did not bring my kazoo this time. But yeah, huge shout out to this platinum. Came early, got the shout out. You already. To, to Kirk. Yes. Hi. Alrighty. Ahmed. Dead Nuggy. Hello. Cyber. Cyberg Ryan. A Cyberg Guyan. Interesting name. Love to see it. Yes. The MLH icon, as always. All right, y'all. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for joining us. As always, it's a pleasure to talk to the folks at Global Hack Week. Where is the kazoo? It is nowhere to be found currently, but you know what? It is something that I will be considering taking into stream at a later point in time. I'm not making any promises. I'm taking it into consideration. So y'all stay tuned. Y'all got to keep it locked in. You never know when I might just like pop out of nowhere and start playing it. So huge shout out to you if you happen to do catch that. Outside of that, great session in store for y'all today. As I mentioned in the chat, we've got Jay the Linux guy joining us, courtesy of Linode, going to be showing us how to build your blog website on Ubuntu. So, as always, such a great pleasure to have Jay here. I am not going to waste any more time. I'm just going to go ahead and bring him into the studio so y'all could go ahead and have at it. Much love to y'all. Once again, Rosendo signing off, and here is Jay.
Hi there. How's everybody doing? So great to be here again. I just love doing these. They're a lot of fun, and I just love hanging out with you guys. We're going to build a blog today, which is going to be a lot of fun. So we'll be getting into that shortly. But for those of you that are actually seeing me for the very first time, if you haven't seen my YouTube channel, I think that's what I'm the most famous for right now. So Learn Linux TV. So you could go to learnlinux.tv, the website and the YouTube channel have the same name, kind of matches. It's always good to be consistent when you can. So you could check that out if you haven't already seen it yet. But what we're going to do is, like I said, set up a blog. But a little bit more about me. I also wrote the book Mastering Ubuntu Server. The fourth edition just came out, so I'm very proud of that book. It's doing very well, so that's really exciting. I have a Linux background for probably more than 2 decades. I think I lost count of the years at this point. I love Linux. It's what I do, and it's the cornerstone of pretty much everything that I do when I'm working. Obviously, I like retro games and things like that as a hobby, but Linux has always been my number one hobby, and it's also what pays the bills. So life is great. So what we're going to do, like I said, is build a blog. Now I'm going to set it up on Linode, and I believe there's going to be a coupon code that you guys can get your own account if you don't have one already that we're going to use for this. Now, if you don't have the ability to set up an account on Linode for whatever reason, then you could use whatever you have. If you have a VirtualBox VM or some other Linux installation or means of installing Linux, you could use that. Linode is easier because you could just click in the interface, and you'll see me do it pretty soon. I'll show you how to create an instance there. But again, if you don't have the ability for whatever reason, the commands that I'm going to give you don't actually depend on Linode. So there's that. So before we get started, are there any questions? I'm going to give it about a minute, and then we'll get started. All right. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions. Let's just get right into it. So what I'm going to do is just switch my screen over to my computer, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So everybody should see my browser window right now. I have the Linode dashboard on my screen. And actually, I think what I'm going to do at this point is give you guys a few minutes to register in case you didn't already have an account or didn't already have that set up. So I don't want to leave anyone behind. So in my corner of the world, it's 2:05 right now. So I'll give you guys at least till 2:10, maybe a little bit longer. We'll just see how things go. So switch the camera back to me and give you guys a chance to get caught up and set up your account if you're going to do that. So again, in the meantime, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll give you at least 5 minutes to get this set up if you don't have that already. You should be able to just fill out the account, information when it asks for it, for whatever it is it asks for, username, and some other details. The typical stuff, password, hopefully a very secure password, by the way. So we'll get started as soon as enough of you are through the registration process. All right. So the cancellation mail from Linode, that's interesting. I don't know why that would happen. I don't actually have access to the system that generated those codes. It might be something that was entered in. I can't think of what it might have been, but there's like this system that makes sure it's not a fake account, and obviously it's not because it's you creating that account. So that might be a false positive. I think one thing you could try to do is just set it up again. Just give it a shot. It'd be weird if it works the second time if you didn't change anything, but you know how technology is. Chaos theory, like Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park, one of my favorite characters, obviously. Sometimes chaos theory kind of filters into these things. That's just how technology is. What is Linode? So that is a really good question. During my intros, I often leave out like some very important details, not on purpose, obviously. So Linode is a cloud provider, and what I really like about them is that they're Linux focused, number one, just like me. So it's a personality fit on account of that. And no offense to AWS. AWS is a really is also one of those things. If you learn it, a lot of people are looking for skill sets in that area. But AWS is a little bit more complex. There's a lot more to that platform, and Linode is a lot simpler, which is another reason why I like it personally. I'm actually certified in AWS myself, so I'm very familiar with that platform. But I often reach for Linode because it's what I use for everything, and I appreciate their focus on Linux. And yeah, it's a cloud provider, basically. That's the short answer. All right, so we have at least one person that's registered here. We still have at least a couple more minutes before we dive in. So let's give you guys a few more minutes. A mechanical keyboard, yes, that is the launch keyboard from System 76. And I was a bit of a keyboard hopper. I'm sure you guys might have heard, at least some of you have heard of distro hopper, where someone can't seem to stay on one Linux distribution for very long and they just keep moving around. I was a keyboard hopper, which means I used a different keyboard every week. I just didn't like using the same one for too long. Keeps things interesting, but I like that keyboard so much that I haven't really switched since I did the review video, however long ago that was. So it's a little bit on the expensive side, to say the least. It's worth it, but if you look at the price a bit cross-eyed, I don't blame you. Yeah, I really don't. It is what it is. So, yeah, your setup is awesome. I just recently renovated. And while we're waiting, by the way, let me see if I can get some info here. I posted some pictures on Twitter, and I have the link here. So what I'm going to do is posted in the private chat, which should then be copied into the public chat. So here is the first of two tweets that should be coming your way very soon. And then another one I will send along as well. So you should be seeing these very, very soon. So while we're waiting, you could check it out. Just for a little bit of background, the Office is set up in basically two halves. There's no physical division, but the two things I love the most, Linux is number one, retro gaming is number two. So I have the technology half of the Office and I have the gaming half of the Office. So when you look at the pictures, you should be able to see which is which. And I just renovated this. I think it was a week or two ago. I could probably look at the tweet, the date on that, and find out the exact date. But it was a long week, let me tell you. But it was worth it. I think it paid off. So yeah, one of my things is I hate to see cables on monitors. It's a personal thing, not a rabbit hole anyone else should go into unless you really don't value your time at all. But yeah, I put some serious work into routing cables in the wall so I wouldn't see anything. So there's that too. So that being said, how many of you are ready to go with a either with an account on Linode, a VirtualBox VM, or whatever else it is. I just want to get a roll call here so I don't leave anyone behind, basically. I know it. And by the way, you could also write down the steps and the commands and things. Maybe take a screenshot, whatever it is, if you're not ready. So at least then you have something to go back to and you have the commands that I'm using. But let's see. Oh yeah, recording. That's awesome. So yeah, we'll have a recording. So that's really cool. And as I always do, whenever I do a session like this, if I'm going to go through the work of prepping for a session like I do, then it makes sense to me to create a video of my own on my channel, a professionally produced video. So I think this is going to translate into a video, but then again, it could take a couple of months because I'm always usually 1 or 2 months ahead on my channel. So if you subscribe to my channel, and when I do get an opportunity to convert these steps into a video on that channel, you'll be able to see it, but that could be a while. So in the meantime, there's going to be a recording of this session right here that you guys will have access to. So that way you don't have to worry about being behind. I'll give you guys just a couple more minutes and then we'll dive in. I also got to stay hydrated because, dry throat is hard to use to talk. All right. Excuse me. Michigan allergies all year round. Always something here. So if my voice goes out every now and then, it's that reason. So just ignore it as best you can. So about another minute and we'll dive in. And then we'll get going. So almost time. You know what? Let's just get started right now. So since there's going to be a recording, I think you guys have had enough time, hopefully, to get going on that. If not, like I said, you could check the recording and follow along later. So let's go back to my computer here. And what you're seeing is my Linode account. This is my demo account that I use for the majority of the videos where Linode factors in because I use them a lot, actually, for my own recordings. So I cleaned up everything here. I have no instances at all. So what I'm going to do is create a Linode instance. But before I do, I just want to mention an optional thing you can have that would be an added bonus, not required. So if absolutely nobody has this, it's totally fine. If just 1 or 2 of you have it, then that's fine too. If all of you have this, then you're way ahead of the game. So I'm going to use a domain. And I realize, some of you may not have a domain registered that you could use for this, and that's totally okay. And even if you were to go buy one right now, the setup process takes some time with replication and everything. So I wouldn't rush to buy a domain if you don't have one. It's totally fine. We'll use the IP address for those of you that don't have a domain. So what I'm going to do right now is create an instance here on Linode. I'm going to get the IP address for that instance, and then I'm going to enter it into my DNS manager for basically my other Linode account, my main one. And I'm going to show you, or at least try to show you, getting a certificate for that domain. But with how long it takes to propagate DNS, it may or may not be possible in this session just because of, the chicken and egg, what's going to happen first, right? So I'll try it, but we'll see how it goes. If nothing else, you will have a blog you could use at the, even after this session is over. You can continue to use it. So this is going to be a lot of fun. All right. So what we're going to do is create a new instance. And what I'm going to do right here is choose a distribution. I'm going to go with Ubuntu 2004. It's usually better to use the LTS versions when you can. The non-LTS versions are more bleeding edge. There's nothing wrong with that. But usually for servers, we like to go with LTS because the main difference is that LTS distributions, when it comes to Ubuntu, they are supported for up to 5 years. Supported means, they get security updates for up to 5 years. Whereas with the non-LTS versions, they get security updates for just 9 months. You'd be updating your OS every 9 months at a maximum, probably around every 6 months when it comes out. If you like doing that much extra work, that's totally fine. But in this session, all the commands that I'm doing, they've all been tested on Ubuntu 2204. And if you go with 2210, you're kind of on your own because I didn't test it on that. So let's go with Ubuntu 2204. When it comes to the region, you basically just choose a region that's closer to you geographically or closer to the audience you're trying to prioritize reaching your site. Usually for a blog, it's worldwide. We want everyone to be able to see it. So for that reason, in this case, I would just choose one closer to you. Now, even though I'm in the United States, I'm pretty sure the closest geographically to me is actually Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So I actually live very close to the border of, between the United States and Canada, probably from where I am right now, like 45-minute drive, hour, I'm just guessing something like that. So I'm going to choose that one. It doesn't really matter which one you choose, by the way. Just choose whatever one you want. Okay, so the Linode plan, we should switch over to the shared CPU tab because those are the cheapest. Now you'll get a credit with your, obviously with a new registration, but that credit doesn't last forever. It lasts up to 60 days. So after 60 days, it'll start billing. So may as well just choose a more affordable instance. Unless your blog gets like so super popular that you're getting like millions of visitors, then you probably have to choose a higher instance type, but you can always upgrade it. And the instance type or plan that you choose is going to determine how many CPUs you have, as well as like storage and memory and things like that. So when it comes to which one you should go with, I think the minimum should be 2 gigs. Now, you could probably get away with the 1 gigabyte instance for $5 a month. That's probably going to work just fine. But you're kind of if you use the 1 gigabyte version, there's going to be a time where it's going to not quite keep up because we're going to be running a database on here, WordPress itself, which is what we're going to be using, and we're going to be kind of close to the memory ceiling. So for that reason, I would go with the 2 gigabyte instance. If you go with a higher one, the performance is going to increase by a lot, but there's really not much benefit in doing that. You're just kind of wasting your money. Everything's going to be fast enough with the 2 gigabyte instance here. So that's what I would go with. For the label, I always like to set it for, or name it to match the domain I'm going to use. You could just simply call yours WordPress. It really doesn't matter. Honestly, like this name is not going to be applicable to anything. You can call this like kitty cat or potato, it doesn't matter. Anything you want. But what I'm going to do is call mine blog.learnlinux.cloud. And if I can get this domain replicated quick enough, you might actually be able to visit this domain. If you go there right now, it won't work because there's nothing on the other side of it, but there will be. So I'm just going to name it that just to keep it consistent. For the root password, we would like to use a randomly generated password that you could use whatever tool you might have to generate a random password. If nothing else, come up with something complicated because the easier the password, the easier it is for someone to break in. So one thing you could do is go to Password Haystacks, which is one of my favorite sites. You just search for it, and it should be on the GRC website. And this is how you could tell just how good your password actually is. So if your password is ABC123, how quickly do you think it's going to be hacked? Just out of curiosity. Well, keep your guess in mind because I'm going to type it in, and we're going to see just how strong that password actually is. All right, so online attack, 3.7 weeks. It'll be probably broken into. Fast attack scenario or a massive cracking scenario, less than 1 second. So I think it remains the case you probably should not use this password. So don't use this password. So if you're doing something super complicated, you could basically see the password complexity increase. And then, of course, the likelihood of getting hacked increases as well. So this particular password, because I'm showing it in, to you guys, if I was to use this password, actually, it would just be hacked instantly because you guys are able to see it. But if you were not able to see it and you didn't see me type this and nobody knew about this password, then we're looking at about at least 2.4 billion trillion centuries. So, that's quite a while, I think. I don't think I'm going to be worried about this blog at that point in time. Anyway, just come up with a good password. I don't really care on my end, really, because, this is going to be something that I'm just going to delete after this is all said and done anyway. So it just has to last for the rest of the session. All right. So basically, as a refresher here, Ubuntu 22.04 LTS. Region is whatever you want. And I went under shared CPU and chose the 2 gigabyte Linode instance here. That should be good enough. You can see the price here is $10 a month for that one. Label, whatever you want to call it. I called mine, or I named it the same as the domain I'm going to be using. And someone asked about SSH keys. So yes, that's the thing. There's going to be some things that we can't go over because of time. Password authentication should never be enabled for SSH under any circumstances. The only time you should ever have password authentication enabled with SSH is just long enough to disable it, basically. So I have videos on my channel that goes over that. I don't think we're going to have time. We are going to add some security to it, but you still should lock down SSH. And if you have a static IP, even better, because then you could firewall SSH to only accept connections from your IP address. You still want password authentication disabled, even in that case. But again, there's going to be like probably 100 things we could do to lock this thing down. And I don't think we'll have time to go through everything. But that is a very, very good point on that. So I'm going to go ahead and create it. Let's go ahead and do it. So right now it's creating, and we have the IP address right here. So I'm going to just add this in my domain. So let's do it. And it is 139.177.3.101. All right, so I created a DNS record, and you couldn't see it because the actual DNS that I use is actually using Linode, because right here we have domains. You could add your domain here. Takes a little bit of time, but I don't have a domain on this account because it's just my demo account. So I actually used my real Linode account to set up that because I have the domain over there. So that's why you weren't able to see me add it. But basically all I did was add an A record, and then I set the A record to the IP address for the instance that we have right here. So we just basically give it some time to launch and click on it. Launch the Lish console, which is kind of like a virtual monitor. You can see what's going on here. So right now it's actually booting up. This is what it looks like when it boots up. So even though it says running right here, that doesn't mean it's ready. It means that it's running and at least getting ready. But until this scrolling text right here stops, then it's not really running. So now that we see a login screen, in my case right here, then we can go ahead and log in. The password or the username is going to be root, and then the password is going to be whatever password you set. Now this Lish console right here, you could use this through the entire session if you want. I highly recommend that you use a terminal and use SSH. It's just so much easier, and you're going to see me do it very shortly. If you're on a Linux desktop or laptop or a MacBook, for example, even a Mac desktop, Mac anything, you already have a terminal. If you go in your applications menu, I forgot what Apple calls it these days, there's a terminal in there, and you could use that. That works just fine. So it's built right into macOS. Same with Linux. Now on Windows, there's the Windows services for Unix. Microsoft Store has the Ubuntu desktop in there you could use. If you don't already have it set up, I'm not sure I'd recommend doing that right now in Windows because it will require a reboot, which means you'll be out of the session. You can always rejoin it, but I don't really recommend that. If you don't have a terminal, then just use a Lish console. That way you can stay in this session and not have to worry about restarting your computer or anything like that. So we have an instance. It's ready to go for the next steps, but I'm going to just take a few minutes here and let you guys get caught up and see if there's any questions that I should answer. All right, so Colorful, I'm not sure what plugin you might be installing on that one, so I'm not sure what that might be. So maybe I missed a message that you posted earlier here. Yeah, I don't quite. I need a little bit more information to know what kind of concern you might be running into there. So, not really sure what's going on with that. Yay! So one of my videos for SSH was posted. I have a number of those actually. So again, I'll just give you guys another few seconds. Hydrate. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. So what I'm going to do is just copy this IP address. Again, you could use the Lish console for this part. I'm just going to use SSH. I already have a terminal up right here. So I'm just going to type in SSH root @ and I'll paste in the IP address that I just copied. So if you're using SSH, this is for those of you on Linux or Mac, this is the command if you're in a terminal. If you have a terminal within Windows set up, you could use this command as well. But again, if you don't, then you could just use the Lish console and you don't need to run this command at all. So this is not for those of you in the Lish console. This is for those of you that are not going to be using it. So anyway, I will log into here. Another thing too, so for those of you using the Lish console, again, it's this right here. You could just type in root for the username and then the password you set during the setup process. It really helps if you type in the correct password. There we go. So yeah, you could just log in here and skip what I'm about to do, but I'm just going to do it through SSH. One of the main reasons is because it looks a heck of a lot better in the screen, doesn't it? So you can see the text a lot easier here. So I'll say yes, it's my first time connecting to that particular instance. And I am in. So basically, you should have a command prompt that is ready to accept commands, however it is you are connected. So now the first thing is we should never use root. Root is it's kind of like if you ever played Doom, you're probably familiar with God mode if you play Doom, where you could just have like invincibility, you can't lose, you could just mow through everything and win every level. You could think of root as God mode in Linux because it's the account that lets you do everything. There's nothing that's restricted. You could even delete your entire system and hose your entire server from the root account, and it will not even prompt you. So that's why we recommend not to use root. But root is the only account we have right now, so that's why we're using it. But what we should do is create a user for ourselves and then not use root anymore unless we absolutely have to. So what I'm going to do is type add user, and I'll just create J as my username. It really doesn't matter what you create your username as. Anyway, I'll just press enter here. And then you set a password for the user. Again, make sure it's a good one. And I'll type it again. And for a lot of these, I just press enter to bypass this. Keeps it quick anyway. So enter, 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 enter. And then any time in Linux, when you have a question that's Y or N, yes or no, the capital one is the default. So if you press nothing, then that's the one it's going to use. So if I press enter right now, it's going to assume yes. If it was the opposite, N was capitalized and Y was small, then by pressing enter, it's going to just abort the process. But in this case, Y is capital. I can either press Y, but there's no need to do that. I'll just hit enter, and we have an account. Now, by default, the user account we just created can do nothing. It's like the exact opposite of God mode. The account we created can do absolutely nothing. So to fix that, what we could do is add the user to the sudo group, which will give it access to do more. So what we'll do is type, actually, let me clear the screen so it's less confusing. Okay. So the next command is going to be usermod -a. A is add. We want to add a user to a group or add a user to something, basically. And that something is a group, which is a capital G. So basically those letters mean, add to a group. And the group we want to add a user to is the sudo group. And the user in particular, that we want to add to that group is the one that we just created. So in my case, J, or whatever it is yours is what you'll type here. So we'll just press enter. And then if we type groups and then the username, you should see sudo as a group membership there. So that means you have this step pretty much all set. So what I'm going to do is type exit, and you could do this in the Lish console as well. This will log you out of your server because we want to log in as the user we just created. So I'll type exit. Control D also works for that, by the way. And in the case of SSH or a terminal, we can just hit the up arrow, change the username from root to the one that we've just created. In the Lish console, you'll just type in the username. And type in the password. And we're in. So how's everybody doing? I'm not trying to go too fast, but there is a lot of steps to cover here. So is anybody having any problems or concerns or just needs a minute to catch up? We'll just pause very briefly, give you guys a chance to catch up. And maybe if one of you or a few of you want to throw in some other questions, maybe I'll try to answer those. But we'll see how it goes. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. So the next thing we want to do is rename our server. Now, currently, if I type hostname, which tells you what your hostname is, big surprise, it's just localhost. That's the default here. So um, basically, we want to change the name. You don't have to do this. It's just if you had like, I don't know, 10 servers and they were all named localhost, it would get very confusing because it shows the name of the server right in the prompt. You can see that right here. So if you just leave it by default, it's fine if you have just one server. It's your only server, so there's nothing confusing about that. But I still recommend you get into the habit of naming things anyway. So what we're going to do, and if you're curious how I clear the screen so quickly, it's Control L. I don't know if that works in the Lish console though. But anyway, let's go ahead and rename the server. There's two files that we'll need to edit. They're just text files. So we'll type sudo. If you recall, we added our user to the sudo group, which means our user can use sudo. And what sudo is a escalation of privilege. Now, my user account is not root, obviously, so it has access to nothing. But if I use sudo, then that allows me to use root temporarily for that one-off command. That's what sudo does. Technically, sudo is not just for privilege escalation to root, it's for privilege escalation to another user, any user. But to keep it simple, if you're a beginner, just think of it as how you use root. It just will carry you through like a very long time until that technicality matters, and probably a couple of years later, it won't matter until then. So what we're going to do is we're going to run sudo nano. Nano is a text editor, a command line text editor, and we want to edit a file. So we'll type /etc. We always pronounce it in the Linux community as etc. We always pronounce everything weird. It's just how we do it. It's kind of like a running joke in the Linux community nowadays. And the file name is going to be host name. So it's /etc/host name, just like that. So we'll type in our password. And that's there just to make sure, somebody didn't just walk over to our computer if we went to go get coffee or something and start entering commands. That's why there's a password prompt here, because it just wants to make sure that we are actually the person doing this. So here we have the actual host name for this particular instance. Now, most of you will not have a domain. So for those of you that don't, again, which is probably most of you, just name it WordPress, it's fine. So that's what you could call it. I'm going to call mine, let's see, blog.learnlinux.cloud. And that's going to be the domain that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to set that right here. Now to save it is Control O and then Enter. If you're using the Lish console, it's going to, depending on your browser, probably bring up a menu, or I forgot which. You just cancel out. It still works. It just might pop up something in your face. You could just get out of that, and behind it should be this right here. It should say file name to write, which is just confirming that you want to save the file. Since we gave it the file name already, then it already knows where we want to save it. So I'll press enter and then Control X to exit out. The other file is pretty much similar to this one, but we're going to just take the word name off and change it to host. So it's /etc/host. The host file, I would say, I'm going to guess 30 to 40% of you know exactly what the host file is, because you probably had to use it. Even Windows has this, Mac has this, their own version of it. Every operating system does. It's like a local add IP address to name matching file that it's not DNS, but it's your local name resolution. It's probably the easiest way to put it. A bit difficult to explain, but it's an IP and name matching file that takes precedence over DNS for the most part. So what we're going to do is type 127.0.1.1. So it's also a local host IP, which is what a 127 IP is. It's not something that would be used externally. It just references the local system. Right now, the system is referenced as localhost. We don't want to remove that because localhost is important. but we also want it to be applicable to the name. So for you guys, you could probably just use WordPress for most of you for this. But for me, I'm going to, again, use the domain. It basically just needs to match. So blog.learnlinux.cloud. So again, Control O, enter, Control X to exit out. Now, at this point, there's one super important thing that we have to do right now, and that's install all the updates. You should always install every single update on your server when you first deploy a server, because when you roll out a new server, it's not going to have all the latest security updates. It might have the newer updates to a point. Linode actually, they recreate their images regularly. So it is possible that we may have 0 updates, and that's fine. But 90% of the time, we're going to have some updates. So what we're going to do is run sudo apt update. And this command will not update the packages, but what it will do is actually fetch a list of packages that are available for download. So it updates the list of available packages. That's all this does. You can think of this like a re-inventory kind of thing. So we'll press enter. It's going to go through all these URLs right here, download the information from them. Should take less than a minute. Actually, probably less than 30 seconds in most cases. And at the bottom, it's actually saying that I have 57 packages that can be upgraded. So unless you created an instance ahead of time and updated it, yours probably says the same. So I'll clear the screen and let's get those installed. So to actually install updates, what we'll do is run sudo apt and then dist, short for distribution, -upgrade. Just like that. Again, sudo apt dist upgrade. We're going to press enter on that command. It's going to give us a list of all the packages that it wants to update, which is going to be quite a few, as you see here. Now, since Y is capital, I can confirm by just simply pressing enter. But basically what it's doing is it's just telling me what changes it wants to make. And I have a whole video on apt if you guys want to learn more about it. But we should be fine just to press enter. There's some packages that are being kept back. That happens when a package has been updated, but something it depends on hasn't been updated yet. That's okay. We don't care about that. We could check for updates again, and it'll probably fix it. So I'll press enter. It's going to download all of the updates. And actually, that's really quick. You see, it's already installing the updates. So it should happen fairly quickly here. So just let this finish. And in regards to the jlacroix.com URL that was posted, that is kind of okay. I mean, I probably should update that one. Haven't updated it in a while. LearnLinux.tv is for the YouTube channel, and then I also bought the domain ubuntuserverbook.com if you want to check out my book. So learnlinux.tv, type that into your browser. There's a YouTube link on there in the upper right corner, takes you to the YouTube channel, or you can just scroll through the posts because I also post them there for each video. But if you're interested in the book, it's ubuntuserverbook.com, or even just learnlinux.tv because it links to everything anyway. So yeah, just giving you guys that. We're still waiting for these to update. About 95% done. Some of these packages, these individual ones, take a long time, especially the Linux kernel. So we're just going to let that run. And what's interesting is you're actually seeing, excuse me, you're actually seeing how long things take for real. Because when I actually produce a video, I speed this up. And it might be like 5 seconds for this process when you watch a video. But you're seeing in real time just how long it takes. So this is interesting. Just an interesting little piece of trivia for those of you that are already familiar with the YouTube channel. And yeah, almost there. The init RAM disk or init RD is going to take a minute too. That's normal. Now this one right here is fine. I guess for some of you, this might look like a really egregious message. It's not red. It's more like a maroon color, but it might trick you into thinking, oh my God, something happened. Something went wrong. What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. It's fine. This is just letting you know that as part of the updates, a newer Linux kernel was installed. But in order to use that Linux kernel, you have to reboot. Otherwise, you're not going to be using it. And that also means any security problems that were fixed in the Linux kernel, they are basically only going to be fixed in the new kernel. So that's why we want to reboot as soon as we're done. Normally, we don't really need to reboot Linux very often, but a kernel update is definitely that. Now, this screen here, if it comes up for you, you could just hit enter. It's just letting you know some of these services as part of the update process will be restarted. That might mean if you have a user connected to a service, that user will be disconnected. If you're using SSH, because you'll see that SSH is like right here. Yes, SSH will restart, but if you're connected via SSH, you will not lose your session because that only applies to new sessions. So you shouldn't have any problem by just simply pressing enter on the screen with making no changes. And what we're going to do now is run sudo, actually, let me clear the screen, sudo reboot. We want to reboot the server because obviously we've installed a bunch of updates. We want to take advantage of those updates. And before I reboot it, what I'm going to do is you can follow along if you want to. This is not required by any means here. Let's just, if you just want to do it, you could do sudo cat /var log, should be auth.log. Yep. And if you press enter on that, again, sudo cat /var /log /auth.log. Check this out. Invalid user test. Invalid user Postgres. This is actually, I mean, these are log entries that started as soon as I created the instance. People are really actually trying to get into this instance. As soon as you create a publicly available instance, people are always going to be trying to get in. It's just how it works. It's not like you've done anything wrong. It's not like anybody has a problem with you in particular. It has nothing to do with you in any way. It's just the way the industry is. The industry sees an IP address come up, there's something behind it like a Linux server, then immediately scripts, programs, and sometimes people are scanning for vulnerabilities and they're trying to log in. So as you can see, people are already trying that, which is why security is important. But hopefully you have a really good password. You should have no problem. We'll be adding some security to this later. But anyway, let's just go ahead and run sudo reboot to restart the server. We want to make sure that the vulnerabilities are patched, which is going to give the people that are trying to get into the server a harder time because there's going to be more patches. So press enter and it should drop. Your connection will drop. And usually it's between 1 to 3 minutes until it comes back. One thing you can do is just watch the list console like you see right here, even though it's off right now, it's fine. As soon as the instance starts, which again could take 1 to 3 minutes, it's just going to flood a bunch of text here on the screen. So you'll know immediately when this thing is booting back up again. And we're just kind of waiting for that. So if there's any questions that anyone wants to ask, just go ahead and ask while we're waiting. So right here, it's about to boot and it's about to come back up. So we're not going to want to try to SSH back into this right now because it's going to fail. It's not until the SSH service is started as part of this that we can access it. But basically, when you see the login prompt here in the list console, it's ready to go. So we're just waiting for that. And in my case, it's up and running. We have the login prompt here. So what that means is I should be able to just simply press the up arrow and reconnect. But I'm going to do this a bit differently, though. What I'm going to do, and if you have a domain, you could do this too. But okay, if you don't, then just don't follow along with me if you don't have a domain. But I set it to blog.learnlinux.cloud. Is it going to work? Is it replicated? Moment of truth. Let's see. It is, because it responded. So that means the DNS entry actually worked. Same password. I just use the domain name to log in. It's easier to remember a domain name than it is to remember an IP address. So it says j@blog. That's a good sign. So far, so good. Yours will probably say user@WordPress if you set it to that. That's fine. That's totally fine. So we're going to move a little bit quickly through this because we're kind of running up on some time here. We have a lot to do. So what I'm going to do is run sudo apt install Apache 2. That's going to be the web server that we're going to use for our blog. So when we press enter to install that package, that one package, it's going to result in a bunch of them actually being installed. And you'll see what I mean in a few seconds. There it is. So yeah, we have like 10 things that are going to be installed. So again, with sudo apt install Apache 2, press enter, get that installed. And while that's running, I shouldn't actually need the list console on my part anymore. And the process is done for Apache. So if we go into, if you do have a domain, you should be able to type your domain here into a browser. And you should see an Apache page. If you don't have a blog, or excuse me, if you don't have a domain, you could type in the IP address in your browser, and you should see this exact screen, which is proving that your instance is publicly available. But I would think the people trying to break into the server earlier, that was probably a better indication that it's publicly available. But it's working, so that's good. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is install the database side of things. That's another package. We'll run sudo apt install, then MariaDB. That's a drop-in replacement for MySQL. Same syntax, same commands and all that. It's a licensing reason why this is favored. I'm not going to really get into that. There's nothing wrong with MySQL, so if you use MySQL, that's fine, no judgment. It's just an opinion kind of thing, but it's very common in the industry to use MariaDB instead of MySQL, but the functionality is no different. So I'll press enter on that. Actually, I'm so sorry, I have a typo. It's actually MariaDB-server. That was my fault. I swear I knew that. So sudo apt install MariaDB-server. There we go. So I'm going to press enter. And from this point forward, as soon as this works, we're going to have a database server ready to go. So, all right. Next, we're going to type MySQL _secure _ installation. And actually, we need to put sudo in front of that. So it's sudo space MySQL _secure _ installation. And even though we installed MariaDB, this command, this is the command. It's MySQL at the first part, so that's not a typo or anything. And what this is going to do is ask us some questions. It's not going to make our server super secure, but it's going to give us some safer defaults for the database server. So when I press enter, it's going to ask for the current root password. There shouldn't be one, unless you were ahead of me and set one yourself. I doubt it. We just press enter here. We don't have to type anything for this. Switch to Unix socket authentication. I'll say no. So say no for this one. So this is the first time we're going against the default. So we're going to say no. And we're going to press enter where it shows change the root password. And there isn't a root password. And this is not the password for the user root on the Linux system, the database user root. Same username, completely unrelated purpose. So just create a secure password. And what I'll do is just go ahead and type mine right here. And I'll type it again. Remove anonymous users. Press enter for the default of yes. Disallow root login remotely. A database server should never be publicly available. Okay, it doesn't matter if your web server is publicly available, because how else are people going to get to your website? But your web server internally accesses the database server. It's not an external thing, so we don't really want that. So we'll just hit enter here for the default of yes. Remove the test database, enter for yes. Reload privilege tables, yes, so enter again. And we have a database server. How cool is that? All right, so moving on from here, we're going to run sudo MariaDB, and this is going to log us into the database server. So I'll press enter on that, and you'll see the prompt has changed immediately. So what we're going to do is create a database, and this is going to be a longer command. So I'm going to just type this carefully. So create, we want to create a database, and all caps is not required here. This is actually not case sensitive, but it is very common when you are interacting with a database server that commands are capitalized. If you type a name, that you could just type that lowercase. You'll see that in a minute. We're going to create a database. We're going to call it WordPress DB. So WordPress underscore DB is lowercase because we're providing something. We want it to be named that. It's not actually a command in and of itself. We want to use the default character set. And this command here comes right from the WordPress documentation. We want to use UTF-8 for the character set. We want it collated. And we want it collated as UTF-8 underscore Unicode CI and semicolon to end the statement. So you can screenshot this if you want to jot it down. But basically, that's the command. We're creating a database here. So I'll press enter. And actually, I think I have a typo, obviously. So what did I do wrong? Oh, I typed CLI. You could tell where my mind was. I was thinking about all the command line goodness that we're doing, and I typed CLI when I was supposed to type CI. Ignore the other one. It's this, CI at the end there. So let's try that. Query OK. Great. So if we type show, actually I should do that in caps, show databases. And there's going to be some databases there that the system created. That's okay. At the very end, we have the WordPress database that we've just created. So we have the database. However, the database is useless because no one and nothing can use it. So to fix that, we need to grant some privileges and create a user for it. So to do that, it's grant all privileges on, and then the name of the database, whatever you decided to call it. You should be following along anyway, so you would have named it this, .star. So basically it means grant all privileges on that database plus anything inside it. But who do we want to grant the privileges to? Well, what we're going to do is create a user called WordPress underscore user. And this statement is creating the user. It's creating the user and granting privileges all at the same time in one command. So WordPress underscore user at localhost. We don't want anyone else to log in from the outside or anything like that. And we want to type identified by, and then in single quotes, we'll type the password. I'm going to break my own best practice and have a really easily guessed and insecure password. The only reason why I don't care, again, I'll be deleting this soon anyway, but for you guys, I would recommend just typing something randomly generated in there and press enter. So we have the database, and we're going to type flush privileges and then exit. And now we're back to the normal command prompt. So we've just set up the database. That's ready to go. So the next thing that we're going to do is download WordPress. And to do that, we're going to need the wget command. So I could type which and then wget. Wget is the command that I want to use. It might not be installed, but by typing this command, we'll find out if it is. I get output here. So everyone should get output. If for some reason you don't, it's just sudo apt install wget, but you should not need to run that, because if you see output here with the first command, that means you don't have to do anything because you already have it. All right, so to download WordPress, it's wget and then https://wordpress.org/latest.zip. That's going to download the latest version of WordPress right here to our server. And as you can see, we have it downloaded. Next, we're going to need another command. So I'll type which and then unzip, because it is a zip file. We'll need to unzip it. And I don't have it. So for that, I'm going to run sudo apt install unzip and press enter. And that went by really quickly, but basically I just, again, sudo apt install unzip. That's all I had to do for that. All right, so moving on in my notes here, we're going to unzip latest.zip. That's what we've just downloaded. It's going to actually show us everything that it's unzipping, which is quite a few things here. But if you list the storage here, you have a WordPress folder now. So that's what we're going to use. What we want to do next is change the permissions. So run sudo chown. We're going to change the ownership. We're going to change it to a user www-data group www-data. And actually, I forgot to add the -R option. So it's -R, and then that right there. And we're going to execute that against the WordPress directory. So if I list the storage with the -L option, excuse me, you can see that the WordPress folder is now owned not by me, but by the www-data user, which is the user responsible for serving web pages. So that's why we did that. We're going to do what we're going to do next is run sudo mv for move. And we're going to move WordPress into /var and then www. And you can see WordPress is now there inside that folder. And that's a folder that WordPress is actually looking for. And again, sorry I'm going a little bit fast. We have 4 minutes left. And there's going to be some other things we won't get to, but I have another session on Thursday, and anything left over we'll catch up on in that one. Because that next session should actually have far fewer steps than what we're doing here. Anyway, next we're going to run sudo nano apache2. So /etc/apache2 sites-available wordpress.conf. Now the challenge here is that this particular file is going to be, it's not necessarily big, it's just that it's not quick to jot this down. Okay, so I think for most of you, you're going to want to screenshot this. I actually have a notes file right here, so I'm just going to fetch that config from my notes. Let's see, where is it? It is right here. And then I'm going to paste it right in here so you guys can see it better. So I recommend you screenshot this right here because we're coming up on time, so I unfortunately won't be able to wait as you guys type this in. But again, on Thursday, we'll wrap up anything that we didn't do. And again, just screenshot this file right here. So, and basically what this file is a WordPress configuration file for Apache. So Apache knows how to serve WordPress to your fans, all those millions of people that are going to be viewing your blog. So Control-O, enter to save the file, Control-X. Now, next, we're going to run sudo a2 dissite, abbreviation for Apache2 disable site. We're going to disable 000-default, the default web page that we viewed earlier. We're going to delete that. So I'm referring to when we entered in the IP address and got this page here. So by running this command, that page will no longer work. Well, it'll no longer work when you restart Apache anyway. It'll still work for now. But we want to enable, so a2 end site wordpress.conf. Now, we're basically coming up within seconds of the time here. So unless there's like magically nothing else after this, I think we're probably going to have to pause here and then reconvene on during the next session that I have here. So Rosendo, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming there's probably something coming right after this one. Yep. So yeah, kind of tough for me as this is my first time. You know what? It's tough for everybody when they first start. But what I would say is download the recording or watch the recording when it's available. And there's going to be a video on my channel. So even if you watch the recording and if you're having any trouble at all, it's okay. Don't worry about it because everybody has trouble unless you're a superhuman or something like that. But in the video, I usually go a bit slower. There's a blog post that'll have the commands on there too that you'll have access to. So even if you get a little confused right now, it's totally fine because by the time that video comes out, you'll have that. And we'll also again touch on this in the next session. So if there's anything in particular that's that you're having a problem with, don't get stressed out about it. Totally fine. Actually, when you get confused, that's the best state to be in to learn. Just remember that. It's part of learning. When you're confused, that means you're about to learn something. So we'll get to it. So I have 3 o'clock on my clock right now. So, Rosendo, I don't know if you're hearing this one, but I assume that it's a hard stop. If it's not, I don't mind continuing on. So I can definitely do that, but I'll just wait for instruction on that one. Yep. Okay. So, oh, okay. So it's not a hard stop. Let's just go ahead and just see how far we can get. So what we've done so far is we enabled the WordPress config that we've just created, and we have that enabled. So let's just go ahead and get through it. So what we're going to do is another long one, actually. I'm going to copy all this. So don't worry about this part right now. Ignore the person behind the curtain. There we go. So there's a bunch of packages we're going to install. And this is basically installing PHP support because WordPress uses that, and a number of extensions and whatnot. So I'll press enter. Again, pause the screen if you want to jot these down. And I'm going to try to get my notes publicly available so that way you guys can work on this even after we're done if you want. I don't know how long this is going to take me. I'll just send the notes file and see if it could be put in a place where all of you guys can find it. And since this is going to be on YouTube, maybe I'll see if I can get this up on the YouTube as well. So I'll press enter and we'll install all of those packages. All right, and we're almost there. Next, we're going to run sudo a2 nmod and then rewrite. So this is enabling the rewrite function of Apache. So it's the ability to basically rewrite URLs. And it says that we need to restart Apache. So what I'm going to do is actually run the command with sudo that it shows right there, sudo systemctl restart Apache 2. Just like that. And now, check this out. This is the default web page. I can only see this. I disabled this. We disabled this, but I didn't refresh the page, so it's still here. If I refresh the page, though, actually, I should, in my case, I should go to that domain that I set for this. So for most of you, it's the IP address. For me, blog.learnlinux.cloud. See what happens. And check this out. Just if I can enlarge this a bit. So this is a form we fill out really quickly. So the first thing is your language of choice here. Just go ahead and select it if it's not the default. We're going to click Let's Go. For your for the database name, we called that, whoops, I remember correctly, WordPress _DB. Let me double check myself. I believe that's the case. So that would be WordPress DB, and then the user was, yep, okay. So WordPress _DB username. Following along, WordPress _user. Whoops. Password. And I just created this really simple password right here. You're seeing this, but I don't really care because this is just a password when I don't care about things. I really wish they would have blocked this out, but whatever, it doesn't matter. That's just my I don't care password. You guys should not use that password, obviously, because it'll be hacked quickly. Database host is localhost. We're going to leave that alone. We're going to leave this alone and click submit. And apparently I typed something wrong here. So I believe, oh, you know what it was? I set it to secret password. So the password I just typed right here in the clear, I didn't even use it. So I guess it's not a big deal that I showed that one, but I'm showing this one instead. It's fine. Do as I say, not as I do, right? So let's just try this again. Aha, this looks promising. Let's run the installation. Site title, whatever you want to call it, my awesome blog. Username, admin, I guess, if it lets me use it. Copy this password here, if there is one. If not, generate one. email, put your real email here. This is just a sample, so I'm basically not doing that. And I don't really think there's any reason to check this box unless you don't want your blog to be popular. I don't really know if that's anybody here. I doubt it, but let's click install WordPress. Success. This looks good. So we can log in with a username and a password. So we have a blog. So now if I go to that URL or IP address again in another tab, my awesome blog, we have an Ubuntu based blog. We did it. So I realized this was a lot. So don't worry about it. I know I went fast. It's fine. Like I've said probably a gazillion times, there's going to be recording, so you'll be able to pause when you go back and watch it. And I'll get my notes to somebody that can get those notes within reach of you guys, so that way you could copy and paste, which is a lot easier because especially when you have that big config file, then well, I mean that could the margin of error is huge because you could probably look at it, not understand why something's not working, and it's a typo. Copying and pasting in this case will help you out. But I'll make sure you guys are able to get to the notes that'll help with this. Now, there are still a few things we didn't do because we need to add security to this thing, and we didn't do that yet. So, assuming there's enough time in the next session, we'll go back to this and add that. But for those of you that want a bit of homework and want to just work ahead, it's fine. Install CrowdSec, CROWDSEC. It's a really cool program available for free. You can install, and then you install the bouncer. There's documentation, and I'll link to the documentation, and it'll be in the notes as well, so you can follow along with the notes. And that'll give you, it won't make your server bulletproof, but it'll give you some decent security that I think will be very beneficial for you guys. But check this out. We have a blog on Ubuntu. We set it up during the course of our session today. We have a blog running again. There it is in all its glory. How cool is that? And I think that's about all I could justify because I'm 7 minutes over on my end. So sorry about that if that inconveniences anyone, but I hope this was fun for you guys. Um, so I think that's it for me. Now, if there's still time, so if someone wants to let me know, Rosendo or Mary, if there's any time here for questions, I'll take questions. If not, I'll take questions in the next session. All right, so I'm told to go for it. So I'll spend a few minutes right now, at least 2, if not a few more, just answering questions. So go ahead and throw some questions at me. If you have any, it could be about this session. It could be about Linux in general. If you're asking me what is the best path to enlightenment, I'm still looking for that one. I don't have the answer yet. That's a good thing to look into, though. But as long as it's Linux related, I should have an answer for that. So. And I'm not sure if there's a delay. I use StreamYard myself, and there's often a delay between when I say something and then when people hear it. So I usually assume a 1-minute delay when I ask for questions at least. Why don't you use RHEL or CentOS? There's nothing wrong with those. Ubuntu is my favorite because I always find it more up to date, but not to a point where it's too up to date. It's super stable. I feel like Red Hat and CentOS, the package versions are just so old compared to anything else, which really isn't a problem necessarily. Um, I feel like it's mainly just preference. I actually encourage people to try all of them. You might like Red Hat or CentOS more than Ubuntu. Personally, in my tests, I always prefer Ubuntu because of how much faster it is and things like that. But then again, Linux is always changing. So if I feel like Ubuntu is faster today, that might flip and CentOS might be faster tomorrow. So is experimenting with WSL on a Windows installation a good way to learn Linux? I would say the best way is to get an older computer, if you have a spare, like a spare desktop or something, or even just a server on Linode if you want, and just manage a Linux installation, a real one like that. Not that WSL isn't real. It's just, in my opinion, better to install on real hardware if you can, because then you actually get the whole process from the installation up. Windows will basically have the Linux installation set up for you when you go ahead and install it. Not that it's bad. There's nothing wrong with it. Just not, it might not perform as fast, but it's totally fine if that's all you have. if you have a spare desktop or something, just check your closet. If you just bought a new computer or you have an old one, maybe you can just get Linux installed on it and try other distributions, server distributions, desktop distributions. I feel like that's absolutely the best way to learn it. Just immerse yourself in it. That's always the best way to learn anything. What's the best way to add update posts for a blog hosted this way? So um, actually, when you are here in the admin console, so notice the URL is your IP or domain /WP admin. So that's the admin console. You just go to post right here, add a post. Just click on that. And you just, you could just ignore this. So you could just say blog post. I'll just say hello world. How about that? And I'll publish it. And then if you refresh your blog, and if you scroll down, you should see I guess there already was a hello world post that came with it, but this is the one right here. It's scrolling really fast here. This is the one right here that I just created. Obviously, I'm sure your blog post is going to be way better than mine because I only had one thing to say right there. But you could also go into your console here and you see a list of posts. So I could even just hit the trash button here for that one that was included, refresh, and it's gone. So we only have the one that we just added here. So adding a new blog post is super easy. You can also add pictures and things too. So I think that's really cool. But if anyone is going to be using this blog going forward, like if you're not deleting your account after the session is over, I recommend looking into security. If there's enough time in the next session, I'll give you guys some helpful hints on that. But I also have some videos on my channel that'll help you secure your blog as well. Focus on securing SSH first, and then from there you can secure other things as well. So, all right. Doing anything cool with the launch keyboard? I haven't really set up anything custom yet, to be honest. I feel like I should. But it's kind of the weird thing where it's a blessing and it's not, where I'm creating so much content I don't have enough time to adjust things. But I do plan on probably diving in and doing some things. I set up like a volume control automation on there because you could have different pages of settings and the mute button. um there's so much more that you could do, though. I feel like anybody would probably do a better job than me on that. So maybe you can just comment somewhere that I'm within reach of and let me know if you see anything. So yeah, there's that. I'll answer one more. So give it about a few seconds and see if we have another one. Okay, so yeah, that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. I have another session. That one's going to be about setting up a remote desktop in the cloud, which is going to be really cool. So if you want a computer in the cloud, where visually can log in and open a web browser, run apps and stuff like that right inside your web browser, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's actually going to be fewer steps in that one, so I think we're going to get through it fairly quickly. But even if we don't, it'll still be fun. And I think I'll probably have time to answer some questions and maybe even like come back to this one and show you guys some more things that you can add for those of you that were in this session. So alrighty, so thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me. It's a lot of fun. Again, learnlinux.tv and also ubuntuserverbook.com. Those are some links where you'll find the various things that I make. All right, so I am turning it back over to MLH. Thanks again.